All right, thank you, Shepard, very much. I want to take you out to Los Angeles and the USS Iowa, and it is in this venue that when Donald Trump is going to address these national security issues, the first time he has spoken out and articulated these issues for the American public. He is all into media events. This is a perfect backdrop to do that, and it could be an interesting venue at that ahead of the big debate tomorrow night. Now, there are a lot of folks paying attention to Donald Trump because while he is the front runner, he has got one Ben Carson right on his tail. These are the latest poll figures we have, and all of these others who are largely in single digits or lower are the ones who are going to feel compelled to start taking the Donald on. Whether that includes Mr. Carson is anyone's guess, but we should point out that since the last debate, that is the Fox News debate, Donald Trump is still up about 7 points, but Carson's up north of 20 points. That was then. This is now to a major mover and shaker in the Republican Party who could decide whether there's some staying power to any of what Ben Carson is doing. Bob Vander Plaats, of course, the man who was very influential in all but making Rick Santorum the big winner in Iowa. It was his anointing of Santorum, and I'm sure the Reverend would reject that terminology, that helped make that state a big win for Senator Santorum. It's very good to have you back, sir. Thank you.
Neil, it's always good to be back with you.
I'm looking at Ben Carson's surge in the polls, and I know you have expressed interest in him. Others are taking a look at him. And I'm wondering if you are ready to back him, or are you holding off?
Well, we're holding off. There's a lot of game to be played yet. There's a big process to be played, a debate tomorrow night. But I think what this campaign has shown thus far is that people are looking for outside leadership. They're tired of politics as usual. They're tired of the politicians saying they're going to do one thing and they go and they do another thing. They believe politicians are liars. They're looking for real-life leadership, real-life results. Obviously, Donald Trump gives that to them. Ben Carson gives that to them. They're looking at Carly Fiorina. And even Ted Cruz, who they still view as an outsider.
Are you looking at any of those other names you mentioned? Donald Trump, for example.
Well, we're looking at all of them. We're keeping a fair and level playing field for every one of them. The good news is we have a great field of candidates, but I've got to feel that we have to identify the pulse of the American people, and they're definitely showing they want leadership from the outside today, leadership that actually is going to be bold and courageous once they get to Washington, D.C.
But you also look for someone who has some religious convictions, right?
Well,
is that crucial to you?
We're looking for somebody with character.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it definitely is. We're looking for a person of character, somebody that we can trust. We're looking for somebody that's competent, somebody that can do the job. And we're looking for somebody that surrounds themselves with the right kind of people. What kind of company do they keep? But we always put principle over politics. And so when we look at candidates, we're going to put our principles over any politics and hopefully be able to champion them across the finish line.
All right. Now, you mentioned at the outset that people are getting tired of business as usual, politicians who come from that camp, paraphrasing there. But does that mean, Bob, that the guy you backed 4 years ago is passé?
Well, I don't know about that. Rick Santorum is going to stay in this race. He's already visited all 99 counties. And Rick Santorum knows what happened 4 years ago, where he was at 2% in the polls, and a few weeks later he's winning the Iowa caucuses, and he wins 11 other states.
Well, your endorsement made that in large part possible. It just sounds to me, and I don't want to read between the lines, it just sounds to me like you've moved on.
Well, again, 2016 is not 2012 when I endorsed Rick Santorum. 2016 is not 2008 when I endorsed Mike Huckabee. But the fact is, Huckabee has a great story to tell. Santorum has a great story to tell. But what I'd remind the viewers, Neil, is that we're on September 15, not January 15. And historically, those who are leading the polls on September 15 aren't doing so on January 15.
But I think you made your last backing of Santorum. It was around Thanksgiving, wasn't it?
It was right, I think it was December 20. And it was 2 weeks to the day prior to the Iowa caucuses.
Okay, so are you going to wait that long?
We're probably going to weigh in with our endorsement around the Thanksgiving time frame. And when we make that endorsement, I'm going to go out to everybody I know to try to get them to unite around that one individual.
Could you come here first?
I'd love to come here first. I mean, Neil, you and I have a great relationship. I think when I endorsed Santorum the first time, you kind of threw me under the bus for endorsing him. But then when he won, you had me right back on your show, which shows you're a class act, and gave me some good kudos.
I don't remember that, but I do remember that. But let me ask you real quick, because I want to go to another one who's anointed by God as a man of the markets, Charlie Gasparino. I want to get your take on Donald Trump, because the rap against him is his language and his in-your-face, get tough, sometimes very demeaning approach to other candidates is not exactly, Jesus-like. Now, who am I to judge? But Ben Carson had to dial that back and later apologize to Donald Trump if he had misspoken and said something to offend Donald Trump's sensibilities, or that he wasn't a religious man. Does that stuff matter to you in a candidate? Their demeanor, their comportment, how they treat other candidates, et cetera?
Well, it definitely does. But I think you take away the verbiage that Donald Trump is using, you take away the tone that Donald Trump is using. He is definitely tapping into an emotion right now with the American people.
But that's not what I was asking.
Right.
You don't strike me as someone who would endorse
matter.
that type of approach.
Well, right now, we believe Donald Trump has been very good for this race. That doesn't mean we're going to endorse him to be the candidate for president. But I tell you what, we're thrilled that he says marriage is between a man and a woman, that he stands for the sanctity of human life. He's for religious liberty. But again, he's tapping into an American sentiment that politics, as usual, is over with in America. And therefore, I think he's been very good for this race.
You're a gentleman and a good man. Bob Vanderblatz, you're also very good at very adeptly avoiding my questions, which I deeply admire. But thank you very much.
Well, that
Bob.
way you can have me back on sometime.
I will,
Thank
and
you,
I will make good on that. I hope you do as well. Bob Vanderblatz, very, very good to have you.
Will do.
All right, he is a mover and shaker. He's not a braggart about that, but he does affect votes. In the meantime, back to Donald Trump and the head of this big speech on the USS Iowa tonight. Where he goes and when he goes places, let's just say crowds follow. But he got a little bit more than he bargained for last night in Dallas when he spoke to some 20,000 at the American Airlines Arena. Take a listen to some who were there protesting his views, for example, on illegals and, more to the point, Mexican immigrants. This was from last night. We beeped out a lot of the nasty words because they were saying some not so Christian things, which brings me to Charlie Gasparino and whether that is actually video of his last family reunion.
Yeah.
Charlie, what do you think of that? I mean, it cuts both ways. You mentioned something I thought was very insightful, as you always do, that what he loses on the one hand with some Latino support, he gains on the other hand with what?
Working class white people. And, let's be frank, that's what we're talking about here. What is the forgotten majority? And they were my parents and maybe your parents, people that felt that the Democratic Party left them behind, was engaging in these sort of social issues that they didn't agree with, and they went to the Republican Party.
Right.
Those folks have been staying home in recent elections. One of the reasons why Mitt Romney lost Ohio is because that voting bloc stayed home.
They didn't even go to
them. They didn't go. And
so this group might, given the crowds he generates, might be, sort of their passion to get out there.
Clearly tapping. One of the things that
But can you afford to lose Latino support?
I don't know. I don't know how many Latinos he will lose. I mean, a lot of Latinos don't like the fact that some guy can come in here illegally and get
Very
welfare.
good point. That's an excellent point.
A lot of Latinos are blue collar, working class people. That they see some of this stuff and they don't see it purely through a racial lens. I know that for a fact.
But he's not a typical Republican, right? You were the first to catch us that a lot of what he's talking about is populist, but it ain't exactly traditional Republican, right? This idea that he would go after companies that dare ship jobs overseas, as he puts it, enforce a minimum 35%. In other words, the top corporate tax rate on companies that Vamusky, like
Neil,
that, like automakers.
Neil, those are the issues that are important to that group that I talked about, that blue-collar, largely working-class white sort of part
but
of the
it must
electorate.
scare a lot of the corporate CEOs you're talking about in Wall Street.
Yeah, it does. I mean, listen, we've reported on your show that Wall Street's in a panic over him, but that is a very important block for the Republicans to get. And, you know, one of the things about Trump that's interesting, everybody always thought the fissures in the Republican Party is between the religious right and the more mainstream, you know, libertarian or even the Wall Street types. You know, this other group is out there. They don't care about the flat tax. They don't care about capital gains or carried interest and all the stuff that makes Wall Street swoon. They care about they're losing jobs, so they do. So there is an issue of protectionism on their part. They do care about immigration. They live in Texas and Arizona, and they see.
And you know, the last
negative
guy
parts.
who got together that kind of disgruntled base was Ronald Reagan.
Right, but they see the negatives of immigration, as Peggy Noonan pointed out in her great column last week. So it's a force to be reckoned with. Give Donald Trump credit for tapping into that. I just hope he really believes what he says about this stuff. This isn't a marketing ploy, but we shall see.
All right, he's speaking on the deck of a ship tonight. You know.
Yes.
Well, I've got you here, but I want to pick your brain on this. If we can, maybe just take a quick look at the Dow, how it closed out the day. We're about 228 points, and this might strike you as odd, coming as it does the same week we're hearing the Federal Reserve is meeting and could hike interest rates. There's a split view as to whether that happens sooner rather than later. But that it is going to happen because the Fed has drawn a line in the sand here. What is interesting to note is there was some weak news today, or weaker than expected news, that buoyed some traders into thinking maybe they don't move on interest rates. The Fed funds rate, as it's popularly known, the overnight bank lending rate, has been stuck at around zero for the better part of 8 years. But you have a different theory on this.
It's from one of my best sources, a guy named David Seaberg over at Cowen and Company. He's a great trader. He basically pointed out this: the
bond trader.
He's
right?
a bond trader.
Right.
The markets are craving clarity. One way to give them clarity is to raise the rates now, and then you put off for a while. You say, well, you know, we'll just see how it goes. It'll be very gradual. And he believes that the market's up today is because net there is more evidence that they're going to raise on Thursday than not. That's
not wait till December.
No, and the reason why is because they want clarity. There's no reason to wait to December.
In other words, if the Fed were to come and say, we're one and done for a while,
yes,
would they be that blank?
That's what Seaberg says, and you know what? He's usually right. I'm telling you.
Well, that flies in the face of consensus.
Economists.
Yes.
I take guys.
Bond traders have money on the line.
Yeah, I mean, they're smarter than economists. Economists are flacks, essentially. That's what they are. Yes, they are. They articulate the interest rate policy of the company. They're very guarded. I'm telling you what a guy that loses or wins money, you know, is saying. And he makes a very valid point.
We have a strong base of economists who watch the show.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being called a flack.
Okay.
They call reporters hacks.
They do it that. They do it that. All right. This week, of course, on Fox Business Network, we are going to be monitoring that big announcement. It's a 2-day Fed meeting that starts tomorrow, of course, on Thursday. Then once everything happens at around 2 o'clock and we get the word, we're going to be live on that, on the developments, every single angle. But you know what we're going to do differently than a lot of other networks when they cover this? We're going to use this great new language. You might have heard it. English! So we look forward to seeing you on that. All right, now in the meantime, we've been looking at this mounting global refugee crisis, but something happened not only at the border of so many European countries that mirrors something that happened in Miami Beach today that draws it all together and is proof the world has the same exact problem.